All right. Hello, everybody, and happy winter solstice. My name is Elizabeth McLean, and I am the Recreation Programming Specialist here with Murray County Parks and Recreation. I just want to start off by saying thank you for joining us tonight for our first ever star party with our special guest and NASA Solar System Ambassador, Lon Maxwell. Tonight's event is, of course, virtual, but we look forward to hosting more star parties in the future. And hopefully, one day we can all gather together for one in person. And with this being a virtual event and our first time conducting an event like this, hopefully we won't run into any major technical issues. But if we do, just stick with us and we'll work through anything that comes up. Before we get started, I just want to give you all a couple of reminders. This event is being recorded, so if you have any friends or family who are unable to join, we'll be posting the video on YouTube and sharing across social media after the event. Also, if you have any questions or comments throughout the event, feel free to use the chat box to the right of the video, and we will try to answer all of your questions throughout the program or after the program. And without any further ado, I will hand it over to Mr. Lon Maxwell.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Lon Maxwell. I'm a NASA Solar System Ambassador, which is basically a volunteer educator's position. We work with NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, helping educate people in our local areas about space, getting people involved in STEM. And also generally trying to get people to enjoy backyard astronomy, things like that. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about tonight. Now, tonight, the first thing that I'm going to talk about, of course, is the astronomical event. We'll use that. That's going on right now, and that's a conjunction. So right now, you've probably heard people talk about it as the Christmas star, but right now the planets Jupiter and Saturn are as close as they're going to be in our line of sight for the next, I believe, 800 years. The last time they were this close was in the 1600s. So when you look outside, right now it's probably towards the horizon, or possibly even a little bit below the horizon. You'll see one very bright point of light in the sky as opposed to two separate points of light. And that is because that when we're looking at them, they're both lined up so close that there's only a tenth of a degree of arc separating them. And to the naked eye, we really can't tell the difference. So I'm going to cut over to a video here in a moment where you can actually see what it looks like through the telescope at the Dyer Observatory in Nashville. So give me one moment and I will bring that up for you. Now here, what we're looking at, this is through the large refracting telescope at the Dyer Observatory in Nashville. It's a little bit south of Nashville. It's actually closer to Brentwood. Down here, in this right here, is Jupiter, and you can tell the more elongated item up here. That is Saturn, the ring sticking out on either side. Now, this picture is a little bit fuzzy because it's being taken through a telescope and then through a camera and then through the internet. So everything gets a little shifted over the space. And this is how close they would seem if we were looking at them with a very high-powered telescope. but like on your own at night, just looking straight out, they are so close they appear like one object. It's an interesting thing that's happening today, because today is also the winter solstice. So if it's the longest night of the year, because right now on our trip around the sun, we're always tilted at 24 and a half degrees, I believe, or 23 and a half degrees. But there's always a tilt, and right now we're as far away from the sun as we ever get in our orbit, which is why it's colder and why the nights are longer. So the fact that we're getting the closest alignment of the two planets, as well as the longest night of the year, is kind of a fun overlap. And there are a lot of scientists that believe that something like this, some kind of conjunction, is what is referenced in the Bible as the Christmas star, which is where the name that we are getting comes from. If you want to go out and take a look at the conjunction, because things in space don't happen very quickly. When two things approach each other, they stay close in our line of sight for quite some time. So you'll see them slowly move apart over the next few nights, and until you can see two separate lights again. But the best time to see them is about 20 minutes after sunset, and they're between 10 and 20 degrees above the horizon. It really depends upon where you're at. I live halfway up a hill, so for me, they're right on the grass line of the next house up the hill. But if I go to the top, I can see them fairly well. There's a great trick that if you ever are trying to go out and look, and someone says, "Oh, well, that thing is 10 degrees above the horizon," is you take your hand out at arm's length, so your whole hand, and from the bottom of your hand to the top of your hand, when your arm is fully extended, is about 10 degrees. So you can put the bottom of your hand on the horizon and look just above the top of your fingers, and you'll see about 10 degrees. Now, that also means that each finger is about 2.5 degrees, so that you have 2.5, 5, 7.5, and 10 degrees. That's an easy way to try to find something when someone tells you how far away something is. And it works for everybody, because the way you put your arm out, the length of your arm, means that the perspective is the same if you're an 8-year-old child with a very short arm and a small hand, or a full-grown adult at 6 foot with a relatively large hand. It's all based on how long your arm is. And I mean, it is a guesstimate, but it really does work for a lot of it. So look to the horizon between 10 and 20 degrees above. You'll see a very bright light compared to everything else in the sky, especially at that time when some of the sun's light is still being bent over the horizon a little bit. It's something interesting to see, and it's something that people won't see again for another 800 years. Backyard, if you're looking at backyard astronomy, and this is something that I'm very passionate about, this is a great thing to begin with. This is something that's really a neat place to start, because it's one of those once in a lifetime opportunities, like the eclipse that we had several years ago. I was lucky enough to be at Maxwell Scout Reservation for that one, and we had the longest bit of totality that was available in Middle Tennessee. There's another one coming up. We won't see totality here, but we can go, I believe the closest place is Paducah, Kentucky. If you want to go to see the complete totality for that eclipse, that's coming up in a few years. But these once in a lifetime moments are really great for getting people interested in astronomy. And if you are one of those people who wants to become proficient in astronomy, it's a great time to start looking into what you need for backyard work of your own. So one second here. One of the things when I do this in person, I love to bring out telescopes and show the tools that I use for the basic stuff. Like when I present this to kids, this is the way I present it, only in person. I have everything with me that you can take a look at. But for basic backyard astronomy, there are just a few very minor basic tools that you need. Really, there's only one thing that you absolutely have to have, and that is a decent star chart. Now, the star chart down here is just an example. You can find them in books, you can find them in magazines. Go to your local grocery store or library, anybody that has astronomy magazine or Sky and Telescope. Any of the magazines like that will publish a monthly star chart, because the charts themselves change over time. What we can see at night right now is different from what we'll see if it's, say, July. Like right now, I could go outside and you could find in the southwest sky, Orion should be rising right about now. And it's a very, very easy constellation to pick out. If the stars are bright, a lot of people know what it looks like. But in the summertime, you can't find that one because it doesn't rise until very close to dawn because of that angle that we were talking about earlier, which has given us the solstice. So you want to make sure you have a star chart that is current for that month. Like I say, things in space don't happen very quickly. So a month-long chart will pretty much cover you for any time. One of the things that I have seen a lot of kids that I've worked with use is a little glow-in-the-dark chart that has a spinning wheel on the side so that you can change it for the time of day and what part of the year, and it'll actually give you the constellations that should be out when you're out looking. If your star chart is a basic paper chart, something else you're going to want to take with you is a flashlight. Now, this is a little crook neck flashlight that I have used for years. It has a little red lens in it, and the red lens is the one that's important for astronomy. That's what we use when we're looking at star charts or we're trying to adjust our telescopes in a specific way, because the red light does not affect our eyes the way other lights do. Red light does not cause your pupils to dilate. The same way that in the old days when they were developing film, you could develop a picture with a red light in a dark room without it ruining the picture. The red cell in a flashlight can preserve your night vision so that you can still look up at the stars and look down at your chart with a light on and not have to worry about taking. It can be up to 10 to 20 minutes to get night vision back if you get exposed to a bright light. You don't have to go out and buy a special light like this one. They're not incredibly expensive. This one, the one I've been using, I've had since I was a Boy Scout more years ago than I care to remember. But you can actually just find stuff around your house. This is a basic little mag light flashlight that someone's taken a rubber band and some cellophane and just put it over the top. I have done this with basic flashlights for my kids. With sometimes you'll get the little prize. You want to prize things in the mail that come with a red decoder that you can use to find out if you've won. And I'll save those and cut them up so that they'll fit in the over the flashlight lens. Just to have something that's a red light. It's going to be brighter than if you had something that was purpose built for it, but it's still a good thing to have rather than just going out there with your with a regular flashlight. Because every time you get that light in your eyes, like I say, it'll take 10 or 20 minutes before you will be able to actually really see the stars again. And the other thing that's very easy to come by, a lot of people have these, or they've either seen them or know someone who has a pair that they can borrow, and that's a set of binoculars. The ones in the picture here are the larger binoculars. They have a much better magnification ratio, meaning that when you look through them, you're going to see things a lot closer. In the case of binoculars, they're not really there to make the stars seem that much closer, but because they can gather more light and bring it into your eyes than your eyes can on their own, you're going to see a lot more stars. Like I live in the northern part of Colombia, just south of the Saturn plant. And when I go out in my backyard, I can probably see 40 or 50 stars, provided that the whole neighborhood isn't lit up for Christmas. I can probably see a fair number of stars. But if I were to stay out long enough to get my night vision acclimated and then use the binoculars, you can really see how many stars you're missing. Binoculars are so powerful that you can actually see things that you thought were 2 stars or 1 star is actually 2 stars, much like the conjunction I was talking about before. There are what they call binary stars. And binary stars have 2 stars that are either rotating around each other, and the other kind of binary star is where 2 stars are in our line of sight, like the way Saturn and Jupiter are now. But a good set of binoculars is enough to sometimes be able to differentiate between the binoculars. You can see globular clusters and things from the Messier catalog. The Messier catalog is a list of objects that they weren't sure what they were before we had good telescopes. There's a lot of galaxies and nebulas and things like that. Some of them you can actually get a really good look at with just a set of binoculars. So these 3 things are the basic tools. And when I first got into astronomy as a kid, these are all I had. And I still use the binoculars because they're easy to carry with you. I have moved on to a bit more high-tech star chart, but I am still carrying the exact same flashlight. Now, when I talk about a more high-tech star chart, you can get for smartphones and tablets, you can get applications that will help you see what you're looking at, that will give you an up-to-date, up-to-the-minute star chart for exactly what your longitude and latitude are. So, like, I took these are both screenshots from earlier tonight, where you can see that Saturn and Jupiter here are kind of overlapped in both of the shots, because I took them one right after the other to get an idea of what you're going to see in an application like this. These applications are this one, the one down here is an application that's available on the iOS for iPads. It's called Starwalk. There's a newer version even called Starwalk 2. I have to say, NASA does not endorse any of these products specifically. These are just the ones that I use that I have found to be helpful, but there are dozens of applications out there. Both of these applications do pretty much the same thing. They just look a little bit different. But the thing that makes them great is because if I were to hold my iPad up or my phone up, depending on which one I'm using, the Sky 3D is the app I use for my phone because it doesn't take as much data. I can hold it up at arm's length in the direction that I'm looking at, and it will tell me what I'm seeing on the other side of that phone. So if you're out one night and you're just happen to, like, say you stop at the gas station and someone says, "Hey, what's that bright light up there?" You can pull out your phone, hold it up to where the light in the sky looks like it is, and it'll say, "Oh, well, that's Venus. It's out early tonight, or it's on its way down." Because like Jupiter and Saturn here, you can see that they're getting close to the horizon line. So you have a good idea of what things are. It makes it easier to learn your constellations and where they are as well, because you can get used to what surrounds them. It's sometimes hard to really picture something when you're using a flat paper star chart, because the sky overhead is more of a dome than it is anything else. And when we're looking at the stars, going from a piece of paper to what's overhead sometimes gets a little bit tricky. The applications that you can find, I've seen some for the Android operating system for Microsoft's mobile device platforms. They're out there as well. They will help you get used to what you need to look for, where you need to look for it in the night sky. They are very basic, like Sky 3D, which just gives you a 2 or 3D version, depending on what you want to look at. And it'll give you the outlines of the constellations, where the planets are, and that's it. Or you can go for something like Star Walk or Star Walk 2, which is a much more enriched program that will tell you when satellites are going over, or when there are specific meteor showers. When I think it was several months ago, there was a time where you could see, it was right before sunset, you could actually see the International Space Station go overhead. And one of the ways to know where it's going to be is you can follow them through the night sky on the applications like this, especially the more in-depth kind. But the applications are terribly helpful. Find the one that works best for you. There's a bunch out there that are free or low cost, and they're great little tricks to help you find what you want to look for in this night sky, whether it's meteor showers or satellites or planets or stars. They're very helpful. But when everybody thinks of astronomy, they're talking about, or most of the time, they're thinking about looking through that telescope. And telescopes are really nice things to have. If you like space and you like looking up into the heavens and seeing what's out there, it's some of the things that you can see through a telescope are just spectacular. I'll never forget the first time that I looked through a telescope and saw the moons of Jupiter, because I was like, oh, it's Jupiter, and that's pretty cool because you can tell what color it is, and like there's weird little dots around. Oh, and then you realize that you're actually looking at the moons of Jupiter, and that's something that's really cool if astronomy is something that you enjoy. When we think of telescopes, for the most part, what we're looking at are these refracting telescopes. They have a lens, a big lens on one end, and a small lens on the other end, and they just bend the light to make it brighter when it goes into your eye. It's basically the same principle that you were seeing in the binoculars from earlier, but in a larger tube with stronger lenses. Sometimes you'll see something like the one in this picture. Sometimes you'll see them in like in the picture here. Where you've got the crook neck on the eyepiece, and that makes it easier when you're looking for something that's straight overhead. Trying to look through the bottom of a telescope like that can be a little bit difficult. So there's a little mirror in the bottom that has an angle that bends the light directly from what's coming down the telescope up the eyepiece, so that you can see it just as if you were looking through. Can make it a little difficult to orient the telescope. But if you look at the top of the one in this picture here, you'll see that what looks like a very tiny telescope attached to the top, and that is a viewfinder. And you'll use that, if it's properly oriented, to point the telescope in the right direction. Now, you might look at this picture and say, yeah, it's the telescope out during the daytime. And that actually is not something that's unheard of. We will get them out. People who do astronomy will get them out for specific things during the daytime. You want to make sure you have a telescope that can do these things, or one that you don't care about destroying, because one of the things that we like to do is to look at the sun itself. Now, never, and I mean never, look through the telescope at the sun itself. The easiest thing to do, the greatest thing to do with a telescope during the daytime, if you wanted to point it at the sun, is to look for sunspots. And you would do that by using the eyepiece to project onto a large white piece of paper or a sheet or a cloth, and you can actually see the sun with the little dark spots that are on the sun going across. Like I say, you never want to look through the telescope during the daytime in a situation like that. That would be something that you want to, what they call indirect viewing. They do make sunscopes. They're available. I've seen them online in several places. You can get them on Amazon. I found them at Walmart, especially if there's an eclipse coming. But they make sunscopes that are specifically polarized. They have glass that's a lot like welder's goggles, where you can actually look at the sun and see the sunspots with a telescope through one of those. They're like I say, they're inexpensive. Usually, you can find them fairly easily that are built to be used by children, so that they will hold up to being dropped or being left outside over a period of time. I've used them in the past, especially when the eclipse came through. They're cool things to have, but they're also a kind of refracting telescope. They're just a refracting telescope for use during the day. Less common in our idea of what a telescope is, but it's more prevalent. I've seen more of these than I have of any other kind of telescope when you're out at a star party or you're talking to people about what kind of setup that they use. These are reflecting telescopes, and reflecting telescopes, they have a mirror in the back. So down here at the bottom of the telescope is a mirror that is curved to reflect the light up to a smaller mirror, which this is why I love this picture. You can actually see the small mirror here that then projects it out the eyepiece. They both have their pluses and minuses, the reflecting and the refracting telescopes. It's really a matter of your preference or your comfortability. I prefer reflecting telescopes to refracting telescopes because I like being able to stand up properly when I'm using it. I like I tend to go out and look at the stars more in the winter months than I do during the summer months, because the winter skies are cooler and there's less heat distortion. Like when you look at a car on a hot day and you can see that thin layer of wavy air above it, that's heat distortion. And during the summer, you'll see that the stars seem to twinkle a lot more, and it's that same kind of heat distortion, just in a much larger way, that's making your stars look different. So in the winter, the cooler air means there's less heat distortion, which means you get a clearer view of the sky. Reflecting telescopes are better for cool nights because they're open. This is an open end. There's no lens at the top. So the air inside also is the same temperature as the air surrounding, and you don't get fogging or heat buildup inside the tube, and that can happen with the reflecting. Reflecting telescopes are great for looking at planets, for things that are up close, until you get to like something that you'd have to go to an observatory to see. Reflecting telescopes are limited by the size of the lens that they have, and refracting telescopes are limited by the size of the lens. So you can't see as clearly the more distant objects, but things up close are very sharp because you have a much better control of the focus. So my son and I were out one night and he was looking through the reflecting telescope that was mine. And then he decided to get his own out, and he brought his own out, and we were looking at Mars at the time. Mars and Jupiter were very close, and he couldn't figure out why he couldn't find Mars. He kept seeing Jupiter, but only two of the moons. And we looked through, and we realized he was actually able to see Phobos and Deimos, the two moons of Mars, through his refracting telescope, and I could not get it clear in the reflector. So they both have their uses, and it's all a matter of what you want to look at and what you want to what you want to accomplish with yours, when you plan on using it, things like that. You can start with basic telescopes like the two that we've talked about so far at, I've seen them as low as $90. You can, the sky's the limit though, as far as add-ons. You'll want to get something that will hold your interest but sits in your price range, and there are things out there for everybody. But just know that if you plan on doing this, if you think it's something for you, that basic telescope might be something that you need to upgrade over time. Because there are two kinds of telescopes and they both have their pluses and minuses. Of course, there's a third type of telescope, which is a catadioptric telescope, and that has a lens at the front and a mirror at the back. And that way it kind of gets the best of both worlds. Catadioptric telescopes are much more expensive. They're not really geared for, I won't say that they're not geared for beginners, because beginners can use them very easily, but they're not geared for a beginner budget if it's not something that you want to spend a lot of time and money on. I will say that this is really reflected in the one that I have, my catadioptric telescope is it's a Meade, much like the one in the top picture. And I got it because I went looking in thrift stores, and people will buy the expensive stuff and then they'll sell it to Goodwill, or I'm trying to think. I've seen them at my thrift shop at not farmers markets, flea markets. People getting rid of old stuff that they bought that sat in their garage. And an old telescope, as long as it's still in working condition, is just as good as a new telescope. So if that's something that interests you, you might want to start looking on the used market. eBay will sell them. You can find them if you look. But like, I have a very, very nice telescope that I managed to pick up for about $35 because that's what they wanted for it at the Goodwill that I saw it at. But these have they have all the pluses and all the minuses. So you've got a lens here in the front, so it bends the light there and you get that sharp focus. And you've got a mirror in the back that bends it again, so you get the less distortion from the lens. But you also get the fact that it's a closed tube, so heat can build up in it over time and cause the heat distortions that we talked about with the other telescopes. They're not particularly the best kind to start with, just because they're a little bit more difficult to use. But that doesn't mean that they're not a good telescope to have eventually. And like I say, you can go from a basic telescope that's just a simple tube with two lenses. The very first telescopes like that were what what the early astronomers were using. Isaac Newton didn't use something any better than the cheap Meade telescope that you could buy out of the Sears catalog when I was a kid. It was probably about the same strength. But you can see the Galilean moons of Jupiter with something like that. So other worlds are available. You just need to take the time to look. Go online and find a local astronomy group. Almost every area has one. They're a great place to meet people who can teach you how to look at these things. They'll have star viewing parties and telescope nights where these people who are huge fans like I am will bring out all their gear and they'll let you look through them. And you'll be able to see the binary stars and nebulas and the planets so close that you'd never realized how many colors were there. They're all great things that are available that you can do. The closest to us is the Boehner-Seyfert Astronomical Society. I haven't been to one of their star parties in a while because of because of the COVID-19 problem. But I know the last time I looked, they will either meet up in Nashville at Shelby Bottoms, which is a great place to have a lot of people because you've got a nice flat open sky, although some of the light pollution is a problem there. But they also meet at different places along the Natchez Trace, which isn't that far from us. When you talk about light pollution, it's people think about how we pollute the air or how we pollute water, but there's also how we pollute the night sky. So light pollution is something that is a big problem for a lot of backyard astronomers, depending on where you live. I have a great view to the southwest. I have a terrible view to the northeast because there's a bunch of shopping centers and an entire car plant. And all of the lights from their parking lots and their signs and everything cause a glow on the horizon that washes out a lot of the stars. But when I look the other way, where there isn't anything, I see a lot more stars. So those of you who live further out into the county will have a much better night sky. And if you know, if you're someone who lives in an area that's built up with a lot of light, you can. There are parks. There are places like one of the things that I'd like to do with Parks and Recreation eventually is to find a place where we can go that's further out that we can use to actually see a good amount of stars, because the night sky that you're used to and the night sky that's actually out there are so different. It's always great to get a new perspective on it. But Baynard Seifert will meet in places that they know they can get good viewing ability. They're a great resource, and it's nice to have. The Vanderbilt Dyer Observatory does telescope nights where you can go up and look and see through their, like, they'll point it at the moon usually because it's something that's easy to distinguish, but you'll be able to see things you've never seen before on the surface of the moon through a telescope that's gigantic. If you travel, there are places in the United States and Canada and around the world, but I mean, there are places that are not far from us, some in Texas and Michigan, called dark sky preserves, where they've actually set aside land far enough away where there's not much light pollution. I won't say there's none, unfortunately, that's impossible now, but there's not a lot of light pollution, and you can see up into the night sky and see the Milky Way, which most of us can't see unless it's a very clear night and the street lights have gone out. So look for the resources that are available if that's something that you're interested in. The NASA Solar System Ambassadors have event pages on through our website. You can look up NASA Solar System Ambassadors, and there's usually a calendar of events for what's going on close to you. Or if you just need to ask a question, we're more than happy. You can ask me questions through there as well. They'll relay them to me. Let's see. The other thing that I was going to talk about very quickly before we start taking questions is one of the things that they like us to do with NASA is we talk about the things that are happening that NASA is doing right now. And last year, 2019, we had the 50th anniversary of the Apollo landing from Apollo 11, and that was something that a lot of people got a lot of people interested in space. And one of the things that has brought about that renewed interest in space is that we have a new program that's called Project Artemis that has the goal of putting Americans on the moon again. And Project Artemis, they have a great website. It's available through NASA. It talks about humanity's return to the moon. And because we're at the very early stages on this, it's just like what our parents and our grandparents saw with the Apollo program, except in our current interconnected world with the internet and 24-hour news, we really have a way to look into what they're doing and how they're going to do it in ways that nobody before even had an idea about. They just named some of the astronauts that are going to be the first astronauts to return to the moon in 50 years. There's a video here that you can look at. You can see the latest updates on what kind of experiments, what kind of platform they're going to be using, how they're going to work. It's really a great website. So if you're interested in space travel, if you want to be interested in the way that we really haven't had an opportunity to be in quite a few years, following Project Athena is going to be, Project Artemis is going to be spectacular. So not only will this return Americans to the moon, we will also have our very first woman to be on the moon as well. Even up here in the top, you can get just the basics of why we're going to go, how we're going to get there, what the latest news items are. It's a great source of information. We always want people to be excited about space travel, about space exploration, and about the missions that NASA has going on, because we're exploring the galaxy we're exploring the solar system all the time, and we just don't always do it with people. And a lot of people don't realize how much of what NASA does is exploration, but doesn't involve people on the ground. We've been on Mars for almost 30 years now, and as of next year, we're going to put down one of the largest rovers we've ever sent to Mars, the Perseverance rover. And Perseverance is going to go up to Mars. It's going to look for samples, which it will take and store. It's got a built-in lab. It has as one of the greatest things I've ever seen. There's a remote-controlled helicopter, a little drone that is attached to the rover that they're going to try to fly around Mars just to see if that's something that's actually viable. But the Perseverance rover website is a great place to look. But there's so many things that are going on for adults, for children, anybody who's interested in what's going on in Mars. Like the rover is actually, there's a great picture of the rover. The rover is actually going to be landing very soon, February 18th. It's going to, once it lands, they're going to be carrying that live on the NASA website. So when we get the first pictures back, you'll be able to see exactly what the rover is seeing, with a difference of about 12 minutes. It takes that long for the signal to go from Mars to us, but you'll be seeing at the same time that NASA is. It's going to be a spectacular event. This is I can get this to come up here. This is the helicopter that they're talking about building, or talking about deploying. They've built it already. They're trying to find out if it's something that they can actually use on Mars. Their atmosphere is much, much thinner than ours, and the way that propellers work is they push the air down to lift something into the air, and we're not sure if there's enough atmosphere to generate the lift necessary. So that's something that they're going to find out. And if they find that it can work, it's going to prove to be very helpful for both future missions like this one, where it's a probe, as well as what we're going to do when we finally send men and women to Mars. Getting people to Mars is an eventual goal, And all of these little steps are what make it both something that we want to do and something that we can do. So those are two of the missions that are available and or that are coming up that are great things to follow. Like I said, keep an eye on the Artemis project, and February 18th is when we will be able to see when Perseverance lands. So that's really all I have for you tonight, and unless anybody has any questions, and I would love to answer questions for you.
Not seeing any questions yet. So just a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions, go ahead and share those in the chat box to the right of the YouTube video, and Lon can answer anything you have. And we can, while we're waiting, I'll share about what Lon helped me identify a couple, last 2 weekends ago, I was on the Tiny River and I just looked up all of a sudden at the sky and I saw a bright flash of light and I was not sure what it was. And I'll let Lon explain it because he can explain it much better than I can about what I saw, which was really incredible.
Well, right now you see a lot of shooting stars, is what most people refer to them as, when you're outside at night. This time of year is a great time to go out and see the meteor showers that cause them. But what Elizabeth saw was what we call a fireball, and a lot of people will never see one. They're very bright. They last longer. Some of them even make noise, which can be both really cool and really terrifying, depending on your outlook. But they're not something that we see a lot of, because they're larger pieces that they're they can be space debris from stuff that men have sent up into the orbit. Like there have been satellites that have gone up there and come down rather spectacularly. There are larger pieces of solar system, like planetary material, that will enter the atmosphere. And sometimes it's the way they enter the atmosphere. If the meteorites move very quickly, so they're usually just a flash, a streak of light across the sky that go by so quickly that you're almost not certain you saw it. But a fireball, because they tend to go through more of the atmosphere in a straighter trajectory, they burn hotter, they burn fast, not fast, they burn slow, and it looks like they're moving slower because they're actually traversing more of our atmosphere than the average meteorite. They're fascinating. If you ever see one, it's always a cool thing to be able to say that you've seen. There are organizations out there that would love you to report them to them. I'm trying to remember. There's a national meteorite tracking group. They don't work for NASA, but they're out there and they do love to take reports, and they'll match them up between two people who see them from different angles to get a better idea of what it is. And you can actually keep track of how many people have seen the same thing. Like, I wasn't sure what I saw the first time I saw one, and I went online and I reported it to them to see if that was something that they knew anything about. And about a week later, they said, "Oh yeah, well, the one that you saw was at such and such a time in the morning in Columbia in this part of the sky. We had somebody report that they saw it in Jackson, Tennessee, looking the other way, so that verifies it was the same time frame." And you're actually helping people learn about what's going on in our own solar system when you do things like that. But like I say, they're rare. We don't get to see them very often. So being able to see one, for people who don't spend a lot of time outside staring at the sky, being able to see one is a neat experience that that you might never ever get a chance to see again, and some people never see one at all. I have seen in, let's see, I started looking, like, actually doing astronomical work as an amateur when I was 13. So in 32 years, I've seen two. And it was one here and one when I was in high school. So it's a long time in between as well. But they're definitely something interesting that you can keep an eye out for, especially now. Like I said, give me 1 second here. I'm actually going to bring up a list of the meteor showers that are coming up. And late fall, early winter is a great time to go out and look for shooting stars, because there's just one right after the other when it comes to the meteor showers. And once again, I'm actually using one of the apps that I use on a regular basis that will it'll give me more of an idea of what's going on around here. Here we go. So towards the end of December, we have the Geminids that are the ones that just ended, which is probably where Elizabeth saw hers, because that was the December 5th through the 18th. The Ursids are the shower that's probably the most prominent right now, and they are in the constellation Ursus, or what most of us know is the Big Dipper. Most meteor showers are actually named after the constellation where the streaks of light originate from. Most commonly, they're not always going to come from that area of the sky, but if you wanted to see more than anywhere else, you would look, in this case, towards the Big Dipper. You would look towards Gemini if you were looking back in the early part of December. In beginning of January, all the way through the month of January, we have the Delta Canids, which are a very active meteor shower. Those will be in the constellation of Canis, which, let's see, I could say a much easier way if I could get this to work. Canis Major, right now it's in the lower eastern horizon, so it's rising right now at 8. So in a month's time, it'll probably be rising about 7 o'clock, 7:30, and that's where you'd want to look for meteorites coming from there. If you know what Orion is, like I said, Orion's an easy one that a lot of people can see because it's shaped like an hourglass, and the stars are very bright. Canis is immediately below that in the night sky. So if you follow a line straight to the horizon from Orion's belt, the center 3 stars in a row, it's going to point you straight at Canis. That's a good place to find it. The other thing that is really interesting to see is some of the comets that are coming. We had one. It was out for most of the summer. It was difficult to see because it was on the horizon at sunset, very similar to what we're having now with the conjunction. The Neowise was the name of the comet. That one, I went out for nights and nights and nights, and I finally managed to see it by changing tactics and looking at it on the other side of the sky when it came up in the morning. But there's always comets that you can see with a decent telescope or a good set of binoculars. They just look like points of light for the most part. But if you follow star watchers like the Baynard Seaford Astronomical Society, or you subscribe to the Twitter feeds for Dyer Observatory, things like that, they'll keep you up to date. NASA has and the NASA social media platform, like every social media site you can think of, we've got one. We'll put up the big things that are coming up, and sometimes they'll sneak up on us like the Neowise did as a comet you can see with just a set of binoculars. But even things like Hale-Bopp from, I believe it was in '96, we had no idea that one was going to be as bright and as prominent in the night sky as it was, and it was only because the interest that people showed that brought it to the attention of the news and then to everybody else. So if you have an interest in it, you really seek out those social media platforms, all the news items that you can find.
Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like we got any questions, but we'll say that's because Lon did such a great job with this program. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Lon, for this amazing virtual star party. And just a reminder to everyone out there, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and here on YouTube for more programs like this. And we hope to continue doing more star parties with Lon. So just keep up with all of that with us here at Maury County Parks and Recreation, and happy holidays.